Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine a symbol, something really innocent like Hello Kitty, an icon.
Right, pure childhood imagery.
Exactly. Now imagine that same image tangled up with one of the most brutal and just deeply disturbing crimes in Hong Kong's history.
It's a shocking contrast.
It really is, and that's where we're diving today, the Hello Kitty murder case. We've pulled key info from the Wikipedia article, the one titled Hello Kitty Murder Case, to sort of guide our conversation.
Yeah.
And our mission really is to dig into this chilling story, pull out the important insights, and help you, the listener, understand not just what happened, but the disturbing why behind it and, its lasting impact.
It's definitely a case that reveals a lot. It's this jarring look at human cruelty,
Yeah.
but it also touches on societal issues, desperation, the justice system, even decades later.
Let's start with the victim, Fan Man-yee. Her life story is, well, it's marked by hardship right from the beginning. Born in Shenzhen, 1976.
Okay.
She was abandoned, grew up in an orphanage in Ma Tao Wei, and then at just 15, she had to leave because of age rules.
So basically pushed out onto the street at 15.
Pretty much. Became homeless, developed a drug addiction, and ended up in street prostitution. She worked at a brothel called Romance Villa for a time.
A really tough start.
Incredibly tough. She married a client in '96 in Qiyuan, also a drug addict. And then in November 1998, just 5 months before she was killed, she gave birth to a son.
Oh, wow. A baby.
Yeah. And this is where you see this real effort to change things. For her son, she actually quit drugs, quit prostitution.
That's a huge step.
Massive. Got a job as a nightclub hostess, left her abusive husband, all for her son. But the consequence was her income dropped significantly. She really struggled.
So she's trying to break free, but that very act makes her more vulnerable in some ways. Financially, at least.
Exactly. It highlights those pressures, doesn't it? How difficult it is to escape that kind of cycle, even when you're trying so hard.
It really does. These systemic issues, the lack of a safety net,
Yeah.
it just traps people. And that attempt to break free, ironically, seems to be what led her into this fatal interaction.
Which brings us to the main perpetrator, Chan Man-lok. The sources say he was 33, a member of the Woxingwo Triad. That's a major organized crime group in Hong Kong.
Right, so involved in that world already.
Yeah, and he had prior convictions for drug trafficking back in '91. Fan had been one of his regular clients at the brothel.
Okay, so they knew each other.
They did. And the trigger for all this horror seems almost mundane at first. Early 1999, Fan stole Chan's wallet. It had about HK $4,000 in it, maybe $500 US.
Okay, a theft.
Chan found out, demanded the money back, but also an extra HK $10,000 fee. Fan gave the wallet back straight away, but she needed time for that extra cash. She just didn't have it.
So it starts with that.
It starts with that, yeah. But it feels like it quickly becomes about more than just the money, right? This perceived betrayal. It seems to twist into something much, much darker.
Absolutely, that's a key point. The initial motive might have been financial recovery, getting his money. But the theft, maybe the perceived disrespect from someone he knew in that context, seems to have shifted it. It became about power, control, maybe revenge. Something far beyond just the cash.
And that desire for control led to the abduction. March 17th, 1999, Fan was taken from her apartment.
Just grabbed her.
Yes, by Chan Man-lok, Loon Wai Loon, who was 21, Loong Xing Cho, who was 26, and disturbingly, a 14-year-old girl, Lau Ming Fong. Sources describe her as a grooming victim, and she was Loong Xing Cho's girlfriend.
A 14-year-old involved.
Yeah. They took Fan to Chan's rented apartment on Granville Road in Simshat Siri. She was imprisoned there for a month.
A whole month.
And Chan's initial idea apparently was just to pimp her out to make money back. But they didn't stay there. They escalated.
That shift from exploitation to extreme violence is chilling. It really speaks to how power dynamics can just spiral downwards into unbelievable cruelty.
And the cruelty was, it's hard to even describe. During that month, the torture she endured was horrific. Beatings with metal bars. Sometimes they strung her up, used her like a punching bag, kicked her in the head, maybe 50 times on one occasion. They'd rub spices into her wounds, burned her legs and feet with candle wax, hot plastic. She couldn't walk.
Just sadistic.
Completely. And they forced her to smile, to say she enjoyed it. If she refused, the torture got worse. This went on until she died from traumatic shock sometime between April 14th and 15th.
It's almost impossible to comprehend that level of sustained, deliberate cruelty. And what the sources say happened next, after her death, it moves into this realm of just absolute dehumanization.
You're right. It gets even more gruesome. After she died, her captors dismembered her body, boiled the remains. Yeah. And then they took her skull and sewed it inside a Hello Kitty mermaid plush toy, filled it with dead insects.
Inside a Hello Kitty doll?
The rest of her body was just discarded. It wasn't until May 24th when the young girl, Lo Mingfang, led the police to the apartment that they started finding things.
She led them there?
Yes. They found the skull in the doll, one tooth, some internal organs in a plastic bag. Other parts turned up later in rubbish dumps across the city. Sham Shui Po, Wan Chai, Taikotsui.
Just discarded like trash.
The first officers on scene were from the Yama Tai Division. They finally identified the skull on June 3rd using something called a photo overlapping method. But that act, sewing the skull into the doll.
What does that tell us? It's beyond just depravity, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The dismemberment, boiling, that's already horrific. But the Hello Kitty doll, that specific act feels like a deliberate, grotesque mockery. It's not just erasing a life, it's defiling the very idea of innocence, of her humanity. It speaks to a terrifying psychological state, a complete void where empathy should be. It's calculated degradation.
The investigation moved quickly after that discovery. Chan Man-lok was arrested May 28th. A SWAT team raided his place.
Okay, so they got him. What about the others? Lun Wai-lun, he actually fled to mainland China, to Guangxi, once he realized the murder was in the news. Interpol put him on their most wanted list.
Right.
He was eventually caught, though, February 14th, 2000. Something about passport irregularities. He was sent back to Hong Kong a few days later.
So they routed them out?
Yes. The trial started October 20th, 2000. Verdict came down December 7th. All three men, Chan, Lun Wai-lun, and Lung Xingqiu, were convicted, but not of murder.
Murder, after all that.
Manslaughter. It was a 6-3 jury decision. The ruling was that the state of the remains, it wasn't enough to prove definitively beyond doubt whether she was murdered outright or if she maybe died from a drug overdose during the ordeal. But they did rule she died because of the abuse they inflicted. The 14-year-old girl, Lo Mingfang, she testified against them in exchange for immunity.
Right, the deal for testimony.
Chan and Lung Xingqiu denied the killing part, but they didn't deny dismembering her. Witnesses included Chan's wife, Fan's husband, even Fan's aunt. So this manslaughter verdict, given the sheer brutality described, how do we make sense of that legally?
It's a really stark example of how the law works, right? It needs specific proof. Intent to kill for murder or a direct causal link proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Even with that level of horrific, prolonged abuse, if the forensic evidence is fragmented, or if an alternative cause of death like an overdose can't be completely ruled out by the jury's standard.
Then it falls short of murder in legal terms.
Exactly. It falls to manslaughter, which covers unlawful killing without that specific intent required for murder. It definitely raises questions, though, about whether the legal categories always capture the moral reality of extreme violence like this. Does the label manslaughter truly reflect what happened?
The judge, Justice Peter Nguyen, certainly seemed to grasp the severity. He sentenced all three to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 20 years.
Life with parole after 20.
And his statement in court was powerful. He said, "Never in Hong Kong in recent years has a court heard of such cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness."
Strong words.
Very. And psychiatric reports apparently describe the men as remorseless. One reporter who was there called the courtroom scene crazy and scary.
I can only imagine.
Chan appealed but lost in 2007. Lun Xingqiu, however, had his sentence reduced on appeal in 2004 down to 18 years.
Reduced to 18 years.
Okay.
So the case itself concluded, but the echoes continued. A Fan's skull, the one from the doll, it was kept as evidence by the forensic pathologist until all the appeals were done.
Right, standard procedure.
Her birth family was finally notified in March 2004. They got the skull back, and she was cremated later that month.
Closure of a sort for the family.
Hopefully. And the building itself, 31 Granville Road. It stood for a while, but was demolished in 2012. A hotel, the sort of it, was built on the site in 2016. They apparently placed 3 Buddha portraits inside as a kind of memorial. Interesting, that demolition and rebuilding. What does that signify? How communities try to deal with places marked by such darkness.
Yeah, how do they?
Well, it's complex, isn't it? On one hand, it's an attempt to cleanse the space, to literally remove the physical structure associated with the horror, build something new, create a different energy. But the memorial, the Buddha portraits, that acknowledges it too. It's not erasure. It's more like trying to overlay the tragedy with something peaceful, acknowledging the past while trying to move forward, a form of communal coping, perhaps.
That makes sense. Other lingering details. Apparently, a necklace belonging to Fan was found in the apartment's refrigerator during the investigation. It was later given to her son.
Wow, something personal salvaged from it all.
And the case got huge publicity, obviously. It led to 2 movies in 2001, Human Pork Chop and There's a Secret in My Soup, both depicting the events.
Art trying to process the horror.
Yeah. And then there's a really grim update on one of the perpetrators, Lin Xingqiu, the one whose sentence was reduced to 18 years.
Yes, he was released.
He was released in April 2014, but then in August 2022, he was arrested again and sentenced to 12 months.
For what?
For sexually assaulting a 10-year-old girl.
Oh, no. After serving time for that.
Yeah.
That is profoundly disturbing. It just throws those difficult questions about rehabilitation, recidivism, and frankly, public safety right back into sharp focus, doesn't it? The persistence of these violent or harmful patterns.
It really does. So wrapping this up, what does this deep dive mean for you listening? It's just such a stark reminder, isn't it, of the complexities of crime, how justice works, or sometimes feels like it doesn't fully work.
And the sheer resilience some people have.
Exactly, and the desperate situations people find themselves in, and the horrifying capacity for cruelty in others. It covers so much dark ground.
It really does. And maybe the final thought to leave you with is how this case, starting from something as seemingly small as a stolen wallet, how it cascaded through desperation, triad connections, extreme violence, the grotesque handling of remains, the legal outcomes, and even the recent reoffense. It forces us to think about those pathways, how to control, violence, and desperation weave together, and how do these echoes persist, years later challenging our ideas about justice, about rehabilitation, and maybe even about the darker potentials within human nature itself.